So call to order. If everybody could please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you for those of us, for those of you that are joining us tonight. We appreciate you coming on out to our virtual meeting. We had to pivot a little bit. I'm gonna turn it right over to Dr. Massara for the superintendent report.
Okay, thank you so much, George. I appreciate that. I'm going to start just with a few comments. I think first off, I want to publicly thank our New York State legislators, for through a challenging year. I think they recognized that what really needed to be done. Schools are at a place where we have some ground to make up, and we've been advocating for many years for a fair share of foundation aid and to actually run that formula. And they did actually come through with a tremendous increase to the foundation aid formula. And better than that, a statutory plan to phase in foundation aid over the next 3 years. And so that's really good news for the schools, in the state. And I think will go a long way to help us to have a sustainable and predictable financial future moving forward. So good news there. Clearly, some guidance, always on a Friday, we seem to get a lot of guidance out of New York State. And so we did get significant guidance with regard to, changing guidance for school reopenings. Unfortunately, it doesn't really do a lot for us, the guidance, because we are in a high transmission area as per the CDC. Suffolk County is still a red zone per the CDC. And so it really does not change a lot of what we do here. However, it does provide a little bit more information for us. We did bring back all our students last Monday. And I can say that, as expected, one of the things that was absent in the CDC guidance was, in the New York State DOH guidance was that update on any kind of contact tracing. Although areas of low transmission can go to 3 feet, we are still contact tracing at 6 feet. We knew that was a risk coming back, that the contact tracing would lead to quarantines. And we have had more students quarantined in our secondary campus in the last 2 weeks than we had in the beginning, the whole first 3 quarters of the school year. And, again, that's because, increased density, we're going to be quarantining more kids. So we knew that was a risk, but it is something that just needs to be noted. I think we're doing very well because we are, I tell you, one of the hardest working people out there is Ricardo Soto, who has his tape measure handy and has to go out there and do the work and measure 6 feet in between desks and look at seating charts and try to determine who is in contact. It's a tedious and thankless job. But Ricardo is doing tremendous work, to help as part of our mitigation, to keep kids safe and faculty and staff safe. So just a nod to Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo, for your work on that. I know that, it was not, it wasn't anything that anybody wanted to raise their hand to do, but you certainly have done it. And you've done an amazing job on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you.
The other piece of guidance we got on that was on celebrations, which is good news for us as we start thinking about the end of year and graduations and moving up ceremonies and all of those things. So we are moving forward. Tomorrow, on Friday, I did forward all that guidance and then more guidance on Monday, legal interpretation on Monday to our administrative team. Tomorrow in our administrative council meeting, we'll start, going through that, talking about what that guidance really means for us and how that can hopefully help to provide the, most normal, if you will, ceremonies as possible for our kids so that they can enjoy all of those end of year celebrations. One of the things we are seeing is we are seeing an uptick of some students that because of their athletic participation for fear of quarantine. We are seeing some of our students that are involved in various activities, including athletics, choosing to go full virtual because of the fear of quarantine and having to lose that thing that they are very much passionate about. So just sort of a peripheral issue that we've seen. But I do want to move toward and I could talk a little bit more about some other things, but I'll move over to the student recognition portion of this. So Bill, I know you've got a couple of slideshows, and if we can invite Dr. Reggio in, I might be able to do that. I think I see her in here. And Dr. Reggio can quickly, oh, she's in, there you go. And so if you could show the presentation, and then Dr. Reggio can speak to it.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me here to honor 2 middle school students. We have a 6th grader and a 7th grader being honored tonight. So at the middle school, we focus on a trait of the month. Last month's trait was thinker. And we have our teachers focusing on that trait. We have morning announcements that focus on that trait. There's a push-in for every student by our school social worker. Have nominated students to be honored tonight. The first one is Colin Freck, 6th grader, for being a thinker. And Colin was nominated by Mrs. McDermott. Mrs. McDermott said that Colin often asks thoughtful questions in math and looks at problems and solution in ways that are outside the box. His unique perspective prompts conversation among his classmates. Congratulations, Colin.
Congratulations, Colin.
Congratulations.
The second student we'll be honoring tonight is Blake McGovern. Blake is a 7th grader at the middle school and was nominated by Miss Harrison. Miss Harrison said that Blake is constantly working hard to better understand Spanish. In class, where students often try to use Google Translate, Blake chooses to break down the language and uses his mind and reasoning to better understand how to write and speak. Miss Harrison believes that he will be a learner and speaker of Spanish by the way he uses his effort and critical thinking skills inside and outside the classroom. Congratulations to Blake.
Congratulations, Blake.
All right, thank you, Board of Education. And I think Mrs. Mangonia will now honor and recognize a few high school students.
Hi, good evening. Can you
There you
hear
are.
me?
Yep,
Yes.
we hear you.
Okay. All right. So first of all, I would like to say thank you for having me here to do this. This is one of my favorite parts, is when we get to recognize our students. During this Board of Education meeting, we are going to recognize 2 of our Math Honor Society students. So over 50 of our Math Honor Society members competed in a virtual math competition in March called MathCon. MathCon is the largest growing math competition in the nation with over 200,000 participants. And this young student right here, Connor Rudnick, he scored the highest out of our school. He was in the 94th percentile and he has been chosen as a finalist. He will partake in the MathCon finals on May 1st. He's also the vice president of our Math Honor Society. So I'm very excited for Connor. So congratulations to Connor Rudnick, and we wish you luck on May 1st.
Congratulations, Connor. Good luck to you.
And we also have Jeremy. So Jeremy Masterson is the president of our Mu Alpha Theta Math Honor Society, and he scored in the 92nd percentile, also has been chosen as a finalist and will also partake in the finals on May 1st. So congratulations to Jeremy. We are so proud of you and Connor, and we know that you're going to make us proud on May 1st.
Congratulations, Jeremy, and good luck to you too.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mangonia and Dr.
I agree
Reggio.
with Ms. Mangona. That's my favorite part of the board meetings.
Thank And we're not quite done. We don't have a presentation, but we do have a couple other things to point out in terms of recognition. Dan Kudrenko has, from the art department, has indicated that one of our students, Emma Smith Molesto's artwork, was chosen by the Heckscher Museum in Huntington Village for the 2021 Long Island Best Art Exhibition. She is one of only 83 that was selected for April 17th through May 23rd to be displayed. So congratulations to Emma on that. Fantastic. So if you can get out there to the Heckscher Museum, please go see her artwork. So good job, Emma.
Great.
Yes, and a couple other students, actually, just pointing out a couple of alumni. And if you follow our Twitter, you'll see that Erica Kaczynski, former student who's now a senior at Auburn, was featured in an article about the hardworking and celebrated equestrian team down at Auburn. So congratulations to Erica for her recognition down at Auburn University. And also, Mr. Maxwell's daughter, Kelsey Maxwell, if you follow Twitter, you might have seen that. She was named the Central Athletic Collegiate Conference Women's Lacrosse Rookie of the Week. And so I think she got 3 goals, 3 assists in last Saturday's win.
And 3 yellow cards.
You can't get 3. You get kicked out after 2, George.
Well, she got kicked out.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, George, I was trying to make it look good here.
No, well, you know what? It's still wonderful. Thank you for recognizing that.
So good stuff, and good to see our former students and doing great things outside and making us proud here at Center Moriches. We also have some things to be proud about this week. Both girls soccer and boys soccer are moving on to the Suffolk County Championship game with a win yesterday. The girls soccer team beat Southampton, and they'll be moving on. And today, the boys soccer team won a 2-1 contest. One of the highlights of that contest, Colin Rao, our goaltender, scored a 70-yard goal in that game. So that's a pretty incredible feat. And a real highlight reel goal. So very, very cool.
That's wonderful. Congratulations to both those teams.
Yep.
And to Kelly.
We also have girls tennis, boys and girls cross country, and girls volleyball all headed to the postseason. So that's good stuff, and good to see our kids out there on the fields representing well and performing well.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So we wish them all the luck in the world as they move forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Ron.
Yes, absolutely. The next part of the presentation, I'm going to introduce Ms. Laughlin, and Carrie Laughlin, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, is going to be presenting our budget workshop number 5. And we will be, talking a little bit more about, the status of where we are. I want to put one little caveat. This budget shop is you can see on here, review and adoption for April 14th. That was our projected timeline. As you know, due to the circumstances, the budget was a little bit late this year. And we were anticipating the April 1st budget, came in around April 5th or 6th. And it was a significant change from where we thought we were. We had talked early on that the governor's executive budget proposal came in with expecting a $6 billion federal stimulus. That rose to, and he said if we would be fully funded as a state if it came in at 15, it ended up coming in at 24 billion. So we were fully funded, and as I indicated earlier, the legislators came through with foundation aid, as well as some federal stimulus money that will be separate and apart from our actual budget process. So although we were scheduled to adopt, it will be our recommendation to the board after the presentation to just look to table the actual resolution to adopt the budget. We are meeting next week on Tuesday, the 20th, for an Eastern Suffolk BOCES board vote and budget vote. And so at that time, I would recommend that the board consider taking action, and we are well within our statutory obligation in terms of timeliness of our budget if we do that. So Carrie, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Mazzara. So as you said, we're going to go through where we are. We received state aid information last week. It was either Tuesday or Wednesday. So we've been scrambling, trying to decipher what it all means. Dr. Massera and I have been sitting through various webinars that are being offered of different groups we belong to that are analyzing the state budget, and information is being received almost on a daily, hourly basis. Today, just alone, we had 2 additional webinars, and through those, they scheduled additional ones beyond that. So, we're continuing to learn what this all means, as it's such a significant increase in the funding sources. So April 6th, the state budget was passed, and we did get a significant increase in foundation aid, where we were anticipating possibly only 2%. We got about 30% increase in our aid. So it's about $1.3 million that we're seeing additional state aid above what the governor presented back in January. And the goal is for foundation aid to be fully phased in 22-23 in the 22-24 school year. So there is a plan on how they're going to be providing that full phase in. In addition, we got federal stimulus funding that doesn't impact the general fund and the voter approved budget. Those are going to flow through our federal fund, just like most of our grants we receive. Guidance on that will be received April 30th is what we're being told on how to spend these particular grants, 1.4 million and 1.6 million. So as we wait for that additional information, we're reading through the bills ourselves and again, listening to various webinars, but we are told State Education Department will be releasing further guidance April 30th. We also did see a significant increase in UPK funding, and that increase is to implement a 4-year-old full day pre-K program. As you know, currently we offer the half-day program. We contract with Starbright, and they provide half-day program for our children. So currently we get about 129,000. There's an additional increase to that of 256,000 to expand to full day. Again, waiting further guidance on this, what it needs to look like. You don't have to use that funding. It is there and available. And it is being said that the state plans to take it over once the federal monies are no longer, so that would remain as a steady grant going forward. So we are meeting with the state and different organizations trying to understand what this particular grant means itself. But again, has no impact on the general fund. But we did want to make sure the public is aware that that is another category of aid increase. So the foundation aid phase-in, foundation aid's been frozen since 2007, and they've been saying for a long time that they were going to fully fund it and get everybody to where they need to be. The formula is based on various products, our combined wealth ratio, as well as total enrollment within the district. And that total enrollment number isn't just straight student count. There's various formulas that go in to calculate that. Some students actually have a higher weighting in the enrollment count. Our tuition students who we send out, who we have at BOCES, all of that comes into account in order to develop what your foundation aid formula should be. So as those things continue to change, the formula will change if it runs how it's supposed to be. And that's what they're saying will happen in the next 3 years. So currently our foundation aid formula as of January was 12.9 million. I'm sorry, if the formula ran, we're at 12.9 million. We were being funded 7.9. So we were short just about $5 million in foundation aid every year. So 21, 22, as I said, we're getting just under 30%. We're at 1.3 million. And then we'll get the remaining of that from the 5 million to the 1.3, 50% in the next 2 years. So 22, 23 and 23, 24, we'll see just over 1.8 million. Now that 1.8 million again could fluctuate. And again, that's based on the combined wealth ratio as well as the enrollment that I just spoke of earlier. So to be seen if they will continue with this, if they will stick with it. But if they do, we are very excited as that does help fiscal stability for our district going forward. So just a little bit more on the federal grants and the long term for these grants. They're separate and apart from the general fund. It is not voter approved budget. We have the CRRSA funding, which is from the December 2020 federal stimulus package. That was the 1.4 million. That's to be used through September 2023. And what that provides for is you can actually what's called supplant your funds into the general fund. Usually grants you have to supplement your programs with the money. You can't take your general fund expenses and pay for it out of the federal fund. This one does give us a little bit of that flexibility, because the purpose of this grant, from what we're told, is it's to get your schools reopened, get those programs up and running again, get all kids back in the building. So while we're budgeting for those things, and we have already expended quite a bit on that, they are telling us that we can reimburse ourselves essentially with that money. But again, waiting further guidance. The other is the American Rescue Plan, which is also the ARP plan. That's from the March 2021 stimulus package. That's 1.6 million. There's a little bit more restrictive on this spending. It is to be spent over the course of the next 3 years. We have to develop a long-term plan by July 1, 2021. So in the next 2 months, we will be working diligently to come up with what that plan is. We must work with the public, work with the Board of Education and any other stakeholders in order to develop that plan. So you will be hearing from us and presentations as to how we intend to spend this 1.6 million the next 3 years. It will be presented publicly so that we can have a final adoption in July by the Board of Education. However, the few caveats that we do know of, 30% is to be allocated to learning loss. We have to spend at least 12.5% each year, but not more than 62%. What it does focus on is extended school year services, and this program is to supplement, not supplant. So the goal is really to focus on the learning loss that's occurred over the past year and a half. So as an admin team, Dr. Massera and I, we've already started kind of throwing ideas around at each other. We meet tomorrow as a full admin team where we will discuss this a little bit further to start developing drafts that we can then start bringing to the board meetings and public share next month.
Terry, can I just ask, that 30% to be allocated to learning loss, is that a maximum? Is that a minimum?
That's the minimum.
Minimum. So we could,
So if we were to take the 1.6 million and say, okay, we're going to evenly spend it out over the next 3 years, you're 550,000, just, each
Right.
year out, which is well above and beyond that 30%. And we know we do have some learning loss. We do have some areas and certain programs, we think, that could use some additional funding to help kids get right back on track to where they were when everything started back in March.
okay, thank you.
Sure. So kind of just want to go through a timeline. Last time we presented was March 17th, and just want to walk everybody through from that particular meeting, which was our last budget meeting, to how we got to today and what our final budget recommendation is. So if you recall, in March 17th, we did present that we had a revenue shortfall of $970,000. We were applying fund balance of 1.1 million, keeping that status from current year. We were applying the ERS reserve funding of 500,000, which was a reduction from current year. And our total expense, so if you take that the 970,000, the 1.1 and the 500, our expenditures over revenue are actually 2.5 million. So when you see, okay, we got 1.3 million additional state aid, we should have well above what I'm going to present. But you got to kind of look at it as a whole. We go into the year with an already revenue shortfall because we're dipping into our own pocketbooks to help pay for a lot of our programs. So April 1, we did receive a few retirement notices from some support staff and instructional staff, which did result in some savings on the expenditure side. That reduced our shortfall to the 850,000. So that combined with the applied fund balance and the ERS reserve, we were down to 2.4 million of a total shortfall. April 6th, we get the state aid runs from the budgets adopted, and that provides the $1.3 million in aid. That 1.3 does eliminate the 850,000 shortfall, preventing us from having to cut anything out of the budget in order to balance it. We're able to maintain every program that's currently being offered. And we then have an additional revenue source of about $450,000. So Dr. Massera and I met and said, okay, what do we do with this? Now, we do have excess funds, which is great. How do we spend it? What do we allocate it to? So we went back to the board goals and said, what was the board goals back in the beginning of the school year on their financial side? So we said, okay, let's reduce the applied fund balance by the $100,000. If you recall, the goal last year was to reduce it. We couldn't do it. The goal again was this year. We were proposing not to do it, but now we can meet that goal. which is a great thing. We're also going to reduce the ERS reserve allocation to $200,000. In years past, the allocation from reserves ranged anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 each year, which is a much more reasonable number to work with, as well as pay back each year with any savings that we might see. So we want to reduce the allocation to $200,000. We also want to add in $100,000 for capital outlay projects. And again, that's been in the board goals for a couple of years. And we will get into that a little on the next slide. So we'll go a little bit more in depth as to what that is specifically. So as a result, though, of doing that capital outlay, our tax levy limit actually changes. And again, we will get into that in a little bit more detail on the next slides to show you what that does. We've added some contingencies into our budget. It is very typical for schools to carry a contingency or two in their budget for things that may come up. So for our tuition on our special education side, we budget for exactly what we know at this point in time. Students move into the district, students leave the district, students get classified throughout the course of the school year. Additional services may be needed depending on the actual Committee for Special Education meetings that occur. So we're going to add some money into the special education budget in order to accommodate for those changes that typically happen. We're also going to add a teacher contingency. If you recall, back in the beginning of the budget process, we had shown you that we were going to reduce a section in the 4th grade in order to maintain the current kindergarten at 5 sections. So we would take, what our plan now would be is to maintain all sections flat. We would have 5 sections in kindergarten and 1st grade, and then 3rd, 4th, and 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, keep 4 sections. Now that too is all dependent upon enrollment in the kindergarten level. So we are monitoring that closely, but this just gives us that opportunity to maintain class sizes at what they're currently at right now.
So Carrie, I just want to be clear here, those 2 contingencies, we're not putting in, this is not must spend when we talk about the budget. We're talking about a spending plan. We're not locked in.
Correct. There's
So-
flexibility on using that. You know, we present our plan as to how we anticipate the year going for next year. As things change throughout the course of the year, the budget change, and you'll notice on every board meeting, basically we have budget transfers going through because of need changes.
Right.
So those are items that we can continue to look at, especially as we start receiving more information about the federal grant programs, to see if any of those can help supplement some of our programs.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. So to backtrack to capital outlay projects, if you recall, I've been discussing these for the past few years at board meetings. We've been looking at it saying we have a lot of work that needs to be done in our buildings. Our infrastructure needs work. A lot of repairs and replacements that have to get done, that things that were possibly taken out of the capital bond, the last capital bond that was done, and then just things deteriorating. So we are proposing to add a transfer to capital line of $100,000. It's considered a capital outlay project. They're done on an annual basis. The money has to be spent between July 1 and June 30th in full. Once you spend that money, you start getting building aid in the following school year. So our building aid ratio is at 73.2%. It's actually 63%, but then we get additional 10%. So it makes it the 73.2%. So when we spend $100,000, we're next year for the 22-23 budget cycle, we will see additional building aid revenue of $73,000 come through. So our goal with this funding source is to replace the water fountains throughout the district. Recently, we just did a building condition survey with the architects, received a lot of that information back. We will be having a facilities committee meeting upcoming to discuss it in more detail. But on there, they did propose this particular project. I've spoken with our maintenance crew and just said, here's a bunch of different things that are $100,000. And he said 100% bottle filling stations. It would just be ideal. We feel too, coming off of the current situation of a pandemic, it would be best that we have those stations throughout, so kids are not drinking out of the same water fountains all the time, just going forward. We feel it's a more sanitary option to have going forward. We have quite a few throughout the district. We would recommend doing it both at the secondary and elementary campuses. What this also does on the revenue side, though, is it becomes an exemption to our tax levy. So when you do anything with regards to capital projects, such as our bond payments that we have, they become an expense exempt from the tax cap calculation, which gets offset by the building aid. So as you've seen in my past, I've shown you those formulas of how this works. By now adding in this $100,000, we have now an additional exclusion to our tax levy. So just to go a little bit deeper into that, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, so that $100,000 project ostensibly costs us $27,000 because we get the 73 back.
Correct. That would be in year 2, because our
Right.
goal now would be sustain these projects, keep budgeting the $100,000, develop a long-term plan
was
for
the
those
second
projects, and then the project in the following year is a $27,000 project. Yes.
Quick thing, we would need voter approval on all those projects too, right?
No, we don't. The voter approval happens just through this budget process. So what occurs is it's a line item in the budget. We detail it out. The budget hearing will go into detail with it. And as well as the budget notice, we'll have a specific section with regards to the projects and the spending of it. We actually now, once the board adopts the budget, can start the process of getting the paperwork to SCD in order to get in front of the queue. They will start doing their paperwork on their side. Once the budget vote is approved, we call the state and say, okay, our budget's approved, which included the 100,000. We send them all the paperwork, the presentations, the budget notice, all that information, so they know we're in compliance, so that the voters are well aware of what we're doing with the money. And then that allows us to get that permit July or August, because we only have 12 months to get this project done. So we have to get within the queue of SED for approval in order to get the permit to get things rolling. So the impact on the property tax levy limit, back in March 1st, we presented this particular information showing you the calculation of the levy limit. This has to be reported to the controller on March 1st, which has been a little bit of a gripe within my organization, because we're reporting a tax levy with information we don't have. So we're using the information we have at that time. We're using the state aid runs from the governor from January. Interest rates and everything change on building aid. So those numbers could potentially change, which also changes your capital exclusion. And we don't have a budget set. So we don't know what we're going to potentially put in our transfer to capital line. Some districts are seeing significant increases in that line item, just for whatever purposes they might have additional funds, or they have larger projects going forward. But that decision is not usually made until you go through this whole budget process. So March 1st, we presented to the public as well as to the controller. We projected a 0.667% levy to levy increase. And that was using the capital exclusion information we had at that point in time. So now we modify the tax cap calculation using the capital reserve money. The capital outlay money. So we're now recalculating it, and adding in that $100,000 increases the capital exclusion by 100,000. So you can see the 512,000 went to 612, which results in a levy to levy increase of 1.078%. So our maximum allowable levy is 1.078% for the 21-22 school year. Now, again, this too, keep in mind, the voters are not voting on a levy. They're voting on a spending plan. It's an expenditure budget that says we will remain within our levy. So in September, when the board sets the levy, they have the right to set the levy at any level, no more than the max. So through the budget process, while we know we're working through it for our revenue stream, we're not setting the levy through the budget process. We're saying we anticipate it to be this. However, the board sets the levy come September, late September, early October, when we have all the information from our year-end closeout of books, as well as from the assessor's office. So I just want to make that clear, is that what we're recommending is to plan on in the budget process using the full levy of 1.078%. However, that levy does not get set until September.
Carrie, can you just remind me on the capital exclusions line, aside from the $100,000 capital outlay, what else is in there, the 500 plus?
So that is our current debt, our bond payments that we have, which gets offset by the building aid we receive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the taxpayers' cost of projects that were done in years past.
Okay.
So just to show you the proposed tax rate, typically we've been doing this during the budget hearing process, which is in a few weeks, but we did actually receive information from the assessor's office this week. So we figured we should get it in there now, just so the public can see what impact the levy has on their taxes personally. So we project an estimate. Assessed values are going up, and actually from last year to this year, they went up significantly. And we anticipate them to continue going up, just given the current market that we're in and the housing market. So right now we're planning an estimate of a $90,000 increase to the assessed values overall. So with a 1.07% levy increase from the current school year to next year, it would be 2.69. And again, that's per 1,000 is how we calculate this. The average home, from what we're being told right now, is 2,833. It was 2,809. So, those things are all changing. The assessor sets the actual tax rate. We just kind of run with some projections based on the information we have at the current time, just like setting what the tax levy is in March 1st. We do the best we can with the information we have. So we just wanted to make everyone aware that this is the increase. 1920 to 2021, you can see it was a 62.91 increase. But with the low levy increase and the increased assessed values, we intend to keep this, the tax rate increase significantly low. So as I mentioned before, earlier, we were going to use the applied fund balance. Our current year 2021 savings within the expenditure budget will pay back all the reserves we use this year, which would be ERS, TRS, and unemployment, as well as the 1.1 million that we applied. We do anticipate having money above the 4% undesignated that we're allowed. We did discuss, I believe in the last presentation, there was legislation to go higher than 4%. That did not get through in the final budget. So we are to remain at 4% as we close out the books this year. So anything above that will give us the ability to fund reserves for future use. As I said, applied fund balance, we will reduce it, or we're recommending to reduce it from 1.1 million to 1 million for next year. And the goal would be to get it down to 800,000 by the 23-24 school year. And again, that's per the board goal that we have right now. So this is just a summary of the proposed expenditure budget, where everything kind of landed as we worked through the numbers this past week. So the budget to budget is actually a decrease, and you can see the categories there. The significant decrease is within the debt. We expired 1.5 million of debt, which is from old bonds that were paid off. But again, we had a decrease in building aid on the revenue side, which offset that. So that's why our budget is a decrease year over year. And this is a summary of our revenues and the different sources that we have within there. So you can see the reserves has a $674,000 decrease. We are not relying on the reserves to keep our programs in place this year. And our goal is to continue to reduce that reliance as foundation aid continues to be maintained and funded going forward. Our tuition numbers are based on actual counts that we have right now, as well as actual formula calculations for the tuition rate. So that has modified slightly. And then all others had some minor changes within them. So again, our final proposed budget for the 21-22 school year is a $44,301,233 budget. It is the one we are proposing is within the limit of 1.078%, as well as represents a budget to budget decrease. So our next meeting was scheduled for May 5th, which was the budget hearing. However, as Dr. Massara said earlier on in the meeting, we do recommend holding on adopting the budget this evening, kind of let everyone digest all of this information, because there were significant changes that has occurred in the past month, and just mull it over, come back with any other questions so we can lock in our budget and have the vote next Tuesday. Our deadline to vote is Friday of next week. The property tax report card has got to be reported to the state no later than the following Monday. So we do have some time to work on this. We have a week and a half's time. So our recommendation would be to sneak another meeting in there next week, which would be April 20th. in order to adopt the budget. And then from there, May 5th, we would have the budget hearing. We're currently working on the budget brochure that would go out shortly after the adoption of the budget to get to, our goal would be get it to community members prior to the budget hearing, so that they have all this information clearly laid out for them. Any questions from the board?
Carrie, could you go back to the capital outlay slide? Yes, this one. So I just wanted to, because I'm actually fairly excited about this, and I just want to make sure that everybody that's listening understood what George mentioned, because he said it kind of quickly. So the fact that that we get 73% back the following year, and this as this turns into a continual process, we basically are asking the community to spend an extra $100,000 every year, but 73% of that is paid by the state. So we're leveraging the community's money basically 4 to 1. And this is really a great way to get, bang for the buck, essentially, right?
Right. So it's essentially year one, we're asking for the $100,000, because in year two is when it becomes the $27,000, because year two, you're getting the building aid to offset that expense. So it's in year two that we really start seeing the benefit, and the goal would be to keep it in there so that you can really start tackling these smaller projects that really need to get done.
Right. So this year, we're asking the community to outlay the 100,000.
Correct.
Next year, because of the aid that we get, we'll be able to do a $100,000 project for $27,000.
Correct.
Then we'll be able to do that pretty much moving forward once we get that capital outlay.
Yes.
Yeah. And as we know, the capital reserve is something that has been a goal of the board for several years now that we haven't been able to fund. So this is a good way for us to get started with these capital projects until next year, when we can get the capital reserve. That's the one that needs to be voted on by the community to establish,
Correct.
to fund,
Correct.
and to spend.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I'm equally excited about this, Marcus. And I have to say, a much different conversation tonight with regards to the budget than I had anticipated. I think that anybody did, right? The world kind of changed in a much more positive way for us, for the school districts, for schools, for education, and really for children last Tuesday into Wednesday. I was kind of panicking April 1st when we weren't getting any resolution to the budget, and they were working on it all over the weekend. I think poor Ron, I was inundating him with texts over the vacation. But ultimately it really worked out so that we can have conversations about things we want to do as opposed to things that we cannot do.
Correct. And it really is a windfall. It's a win for everyone, but especially for the kids.
Yeah.
The fact that we don't have to focus on, like you said, what are we taking out? And we have the potential with the federal monies to put in or to reinstate some things that maybe we've taken out in the past because we couldn't support it. So, we're excited to see what the federal guidelines are on April 30th. Everyone's trying to digest this information at the same time, and questions are being asked every which way to every organization we possibly can, as we're all trying to understand how there's so much money, and what are we all supposed to do with it. But it's prudent that we spend it wisely, and that we, don't overspend ourselves or overextend ourselves with so much money coming in at once. We really need to maintain fiscal stability going forward. And this is now providing us that opportunity that for the next 3 to 4 years, we actually will be fiscally stable and in order to maintain our programs.
So along those lines, Carrie, as excited as I am about the capital outlay project, if you look historically at our bond projects, they typically, the cycle between projects is, I'm going to say 7-8 years, something like that. And a typical bond project can be almost $10 million. So if you accumulate it, or let's say on an annualized basis, our projects amount to something like $1 million per year. And and if you want to argue, I mean, if you want to say it's closer to 800,000 or 1.2 million, whatever, that's fine, just to toss out some round numbers. So, we have a board goal that we've been trying to work towards, which is establishing the capital reserve fund. And, if we look at what we've been spending on debt service, again, if I'm wrong with these numbers, please correct me. But my recollection is that on average, and it fluctuates greatly, but on average over the past maybe decade or so, we're spending something like $400,000 a year on interest on the bonds that we've used to pay for these projects. So, and that's a huge number, which to put in perspective, that's something like 1% of our total budget.
Mhm.
And every year the board and administration work hard to fight for every 0.1%, to keep the spending in check. So really $400,000 a year is a huge number. You can think of it in terms of adding, a few teachers to our staff, or starting up some new new programs. So it's really a huge number that I think is hard for me personally to justify to the community, because I can't explain what we get for that interest, right? It's not just that I'm personally opposed to giving money to the banks. It's really that we have to spend the money responsibly. And what do we say to the community that this $400,000 in interest gets us? Well, in my perspective, it buys us some flexibility that we don't have to plan ahead quite as much, or that we can react to changing fiscal situations. And we can just go to a bank and say, we need a bond, and this is how we're going to pay for the project. So my contention is that we really want to eliminate this $400,000 a year of interest, if at all possible. And that's, to me, that's really the main benefit of a capital reserve fund, that you can save this money in advance, and that you have the money there ready to be laid out when your project comes due. And that way you're not spending as much money on a bond, and you're not paying that interest, and you're saving that for other parts of your program on an annual basis, let's say. So what I'm bringing up here is really, I'd like us to be mindful that with this big windfall, what would be the optimum level we would want to fund a capital reserve fund annually. I think the board goal was something like $500,000 per year for 10 years. That probably is lower than I'm thinking, but the point is, I'd like us to be mindful of where we'd like to be next year. And is there anything that we should, is there any way we should position ourselves with that in mind this year? So where do we want to put all of the money this year? How does it affect our other reserve funds? And what would be the recommendations? We have to pass a budget, as you said, within the next little over a week. So we don't have time to make a lot of changes. But I just want us to be mindful of that, that we have a potential here to really establish a fund which saves us a lot of money in interest. So I don't know if you have a comment, or if you have corrections in anything that I've said, or if you have any thoughts on how that might affect where we're going in the near future.
Well, the only effect it would have is when you're doing, when you're eliminating debt, you're hurting your tax levy. So, and as we saw this year, it was a prime example. We had debt fall off the books and we didn't replace it with new debt. So a lot of the financial advisors that we work with, they say, you need to long-term plan. And as you see your debt is expiring, make sure you have a capital bond on, in track, so that you do your borrowing so it's neutral. Because you don't want to see high influx. You're going to have a high tax levy limit, then you're going to drop down to a low one, or even a negative one, because then that ultimately affects your program. So you want to kind of just maintain your tax levy to be pretty steady. And the only thing that's going to really affect it is going to be what the CPI is. And in doing so is when you start looking long-term with the capital programs. We have, like I said, we just received the building condition survey report, which has a lot of work to be done, but that's a 5-year term, that project. And it's also looking at that. We have a repair reserve in place already. So what can we use that for? We have the EPC taking place, which is going to tackle some of the items that are on that list. And we have now adding in a capital outlay projects year over year, starts taking some of those smaller dollars out as well. then creating a capital reserve fund, which I fully support. And I'm really hopeful that next year we can successfully do that and start conversations early in the school year so that everyone is fully aware of what our goal is with that and what the funding source would be looking like and how that would establish. But I think, it's also looking at the 5-year plan of, do we still have to do a capital project? Because if we have to replace a roof, your capital, and if we have to do it within the next 3 years, you're not going to have enough money in a capital reserve fund to help that. So, so it's just those little things that would play out within that 5-year plan, the 5-year facilities plan, as well as the 5-year financial plan. So the two go hand in hand. And I think we can have further conversation at our next facilities committee meeting, definitely, now that we have an updated condition survey, which lays out 5 years of projects. We know where we are financially. We're financially sound right now. And what can this do for us going forward? So I think that, to your point, Marcus, is definitely a further conversation, a bigger conversation, but it's one we definitely need to start having and educating the community on what the needs are of the buildings, of the district as a whole, and what can we do to not impact our programs. We don't want to take away from our kids to do these, projects, which are not very glamorous. A lot of them are really, in some people's eyes, boring. You won't see the work because it's behind the walls, it's unit ventilators, it's replacing fans and exhaust fans and that type of stuff. But it needs to be done. So it definitely is a bigger conversation, a much further conversation, which we will, once we meet with facilities committee, bring these plans out to the community so that they're fully aware of what we're looking at long-term with regards to capital projects and the various funding sources for them.
Right, yeah, no, it's clear you don't want to have the educational program suffer so you can, maintain the buildings better. And that's why I said I want to just be mindful of where we'd like to be in a year and stepping back and saying, how does that affect what we do today?
Mm-hmm. Understood.
Yeah, with that, Carrie, I mean, I know you're working hard on with the facilities and with the architects on this 5-year plan. But to Marcus's point, I mean, some of the things that we have left, Marcus, are like big ticket items. They're parking lots, sidewalks, roofing. I mean, those are things that to chip away on these smaller projects. That's the idea of these the funds that we're talking about, to chip away at the water fountains, to chip away at some of the things, the smaller ticket items. But I think when we get into the facilities committee and have these longer conversations within the next 5 years, some of these bigger ticket items really have to be, addressed. We did the elementary school roof, part of the last bond. The high school roof is going to be a big ticket item, and that's in need. The library, some of the lentils and the windows over there, that's a big ticket item. So there are some, things that Kerry will talk about during the facilities committee that are, need to be addressed in the next 5 years.
And that ties into Marcus's point of where do we want that capital reserve to be funded at, what level, and what's our maximum we want to be able to say we could put into it each year. It all ties in together to say, let's start those conversations now of how do we get to that end point and what's the funding source and how do we get to those funding sources.
It's a much better place than I thought we'd be right now. A couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Building wise, yes.
Carrie, can you go to page 11, please? Sorry. Can you just briefly talk about equipment, because that's a huge increase, just so that everybody knows why that is such a huge increase, percentage?
Sure. So we actually transferred through the course of this process with the budget, buildings and grounds. We're seeing some savings in their line items, and we had budgeted for seal coating to take place in the back parking lot of the high school. And turns out we're not going to do it because of the EPC project. They're going to be putting in the solar. And we figured, why seal coat it when they're going to have to be ripping up certain sections? So we took that $30,000 that we had in their budget and moved it into equipment. And that purpose was to replace some trucks that we have that are breaking down on us, and buy a new truck with a plow for the crew, as well as some other items. So we took some items out of the budget last year for PE, music, athletics. We had reduced those line items last year. We're getting them back into the budget for next year, as they were put on hold. And fortunately, unfortunately, they weren't needed this year under the current circumstances. So it didn't become a need, but we do have the need when we are back full person, normal learning environment. So those are the two main items that we're seeing those increases occur from.
Okay. All right. So all right. I have a question that's not on the budget, but it's part of the budget. As far as with, I know it was discussed in the last slide with the last presentation, I think with the IB versus AP. How many, where are we currently with the IB diploma program? Like how many kids in the class of 2022 will be graduating with the IB diploma? Do we know?
I'm going to defer to Dr. Massaro on that one.
That was just totally out of left field. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you pulled that out of left field. I don't have those
I did.
numbers on me right now. I'd have to go back and check with the high school on that.
Do we know where we are currently with the class of 2023 who had enrolled in the IB program? I know it's not, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we were in the 20s, and I'm not
Okay.
sure where we're at right now, though.
Okay.
You know, things, you know, an unusual year. I'm not sure if we lost kids. I just don't have that at my fingertips right now.
Yeah. Okay.
But I can get that to you.
Sorry.
No, no.
That's-
Top of my head.
Could we just, in the next meeting or so, sneak in an update on the energy performance contract when they're slated to start, what work we can anticipate getting done and so on?
I can actually just quick give you an update. I spoke with Kieran at Johnson Controls, I believe it was last week. The project was not submitted to state yet as a result of some issues at the Clayton Huey roof. So the solar panels that were supposed to go on Clayton Huey roof, where there, as the structural engineer got in, they actually had 3 structural engineers come in, which are very hard to find. A programming note for kids looking to figure out what career they want for college. Here in structural engineers are hard to find, and the place to go to get an education in. So once that work was finally done, they're finding actually that there's certain parts of Clayton Huey that just can't handle the load of the panels. So the solar panels, we're still going to put some on Clayton Huey, but we can't put as many. So we have to modify the recommendation. So if you recall back in the original presentations a year, 2 years ago, we had pulled out some of the exterior lights, the tennis course lights, some out in the front of the high school as well. We could add those in and still remain within our 18-year payback, budget neutral, no additional fees to us with regards to it. So they're finishing that up, and that's a simple submission. The problem is you can't submit the project in pieces. And while they were just waiting on those structural engineering reports, it held up everything on the project because of if you send it in partially, SCD is going to just kick it back to you. So as of last week, Kieran was working up the final proposal to me. I haven't received it as of yet, but I should be getting it shortly from him. And then John Grillo will be submitting all the paperwork up to state. The queue is still not a long wait time. It used to be months and on end, but it is a shortened wait time right now. So the goal and the anticipation is to get that project started in the fall.
Oh, in the fall, okay.
Yeah. We were hoping for this spring, but due to that issue with the
Right.
Clayton Huey roof, it got delayed.
Now, will the decrease in solar panels on the roof impact our goal of zeroing out cost?
No, because it will still remain within the same paybacks. You know, so what it would enter, you know, as Tom was mentioning before, as we, you know, replace roofs and repair roofs and do all of that, we may eventually be able to add more panels on, you know, other places, possibly with a second round of an EPC down the road. But right now let's get through this first one with what we can do, what we have in place, and we should still see the same impact going forward.
Okay, we're adding more lighting to the high school and the elementary exterior. Is that what we were to offset that?
I don't recall if it had an elementary exterior. It was definitely the high school, the tennis courts, the outside front bus loop area, some of those poles replacing out. As soon as I have that proposal with Karen, I'll share it out definitely.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
No problem.
I can't see everybody. How are we on budget questions? Are we good? Marcus? Robin?
Yep.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm happy to see we're getting a truck. I know it's a big,
I think Jose is too, as there's one in the shop and it is not doing well.
good.
Okay. Danielle, you're good?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
No problem.
Committee reports, Ron?
So I just to let you know, Danielle, I just checked with Marissa, just promoted her back into the conversation here.
Thank
so
you.
She can speak to that for you.
Okay, good.
All right, can you hear me?
Hi.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm glad that you asked, because these are numbers that I think are important, and the more word that we can spread with the community, I think the better. So our number at the beginning of the year for the students who are currently enrolled in juniors started out at about 17, and now we have 11 students that are on track next year to graduate with an IB diploma.
Awesome.
And there have been other schools that we visited, and their first year, they're graduating 4. And
Yeah.
that's not bad. That's great. But the fact that we're going to have 11 students, it's exciting. It really is. These students have gone above and beyond. And what I think is really exciting is I've pushed into classes and I've talked to students regarding the IB program. The IB teachers have been talking to the kids, and we're really just trying to get the word out there for the students who are making their schedules or requests for next year. And we already have between 17 and 20 who are interested already in the complete program.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. However, I have a good group of students who are really struggling to make that final decision. I think the fact that we are in the year that we are in is having a big impact. A lot of the kids are nervous because they feel like, what if I'm doing virtual learning? It's going to be, it's going to be harder to do these types of things. Like they're almost getting themselves more nervous about a situation that we might not even have. So, it is hard. I try to talk to the kids and give them a little bit more confidence, because the great thing is I've taught a lot of these students. So I know their potential, so being able to talk to them, I do think that that number could grow. I just think that there's, a little bit more conversation.
No, yeah, that definitely. I appreciate the feedback. When do they have to make that decision? Because I know for the class of 2022, the discussions were in like last March. You had ongoing conversations. Like, are you continuing to have that for the class of 2023? And when do they have to make that ultimate decision?
So most of our students have put their requests in already. The difference between what I'm saying about that, like maybe almost 10 kids who are in between, they are scheduled for IB classes, courses, certificates, but they're not sure if they want to commit to the whole program. So we have many more. I don't have that number right on top of my head, but we have many more students this year, like planning for next year, class of 2023, that will be certificate students. So a lot of students are going to, even if they're not taking the whole program, they're going to be involved in the IB curriculum some way, somehow, which I think is an amazing, thing for our students, even if they're not taking the full program.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, on a similar note, as we see the IB cohort continue to grow in the coming years, and supporting them, do we anticipate that impacting our AP offerings to the extent that we would have to cut back?
So it really depends on which classes we have students that are interested in. As of right now, there are a few classes that are COSAT. So students, it's really, there's alignment between the AP and the IB curriculum, right? At the end of the day, the teachers have done their homework and they have, they dive right into the curriculum and they make sure that if they can teach more kids at one time, we're a small school. So at the end of the day, we don't want to cut programs. We don't want to cut AP classes, but we also want to give our students opportunities for IB classes without having to hire many teachers that we're just not able to do. So we've gotten very creative. And I think that this year, obviously being the first year, we've already learned a lot. And I think that we're getting feedback from the students, just sent out a survey to a lot of students just to kind of get their feedback to see which classes they feel, are growing well and which ones we can improve on. And in my mind, I feel like promoting the opportunity for the IB classes where students would still be prepared to take an AP exam, I think is more beneficial to our students, because if you take an AP class, you can't get IB credit. However, if you take an IB class, you can get a certificate, you can get IB credit, and you're allowed to sit for an AP exam. So to me, that gives our students more opportunity, opens the door a little bit more. So that's more of the route where I see us going. So I think that'll give the most opportunity to our students.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mangonia. The last thing I would just mention is that over the break, we were approached with an opportunity, and that opportunity was from the county to run the first school point of dispensing for vaccinations, and so we were able to actually turn that around very, very quickly once we got the confirmation. And 299 Center Moriches residents were able to get a vaccination in the gym of Center Moriches High School. So once I got that call, we got going right away on it. I want to thank Carrie for coming in over vacation and helping with that as well, with the coordination and meeting with.
That was pretty awesome.
But
that was great.
I think it was a real positive for the community, and I want to thank the county executive, Steve Malone, for looking to us to lead and be the first in the county to do that. So really, I thought that was something that I just wanted to mention. Moving on.
Also, can you just I would say stress that it was a Board of Health or like Department of Health thing, not a school district thing. Because there was some backlash from other community members, other people outside the community saying that it was just open to Center Moriches people, and they weren't like East Moriches people or East Manaville people were not. It wasn't open to them. They were upset about that.
So there's a reason for that, and the county keeps records of precisely what percentage of populations are vaccinated, and they did determine that the 11934 zip code wasn't a zip code that was underrepresented in vaccinations.
Oh, great.
And so the purpose of going to specific locations for vaccinations and opening up community pods is to bring the vaccine where it's needed. So that's why they limited it. It certainly was not our decision to limit it, but we were open to certainly bringing the county and Suffolk County Department of Health in to vaccinate people in our community.
Thank you.
And just thank the board for, I think, allowing us to move forward with that as well. That's the contract that we approved a couple of months ago.
Yep.
For the POD, for the pod.
Pretty awesome.
So good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I think, most of our committees will probably report out at our next meeting because we're sort of in between. We reported out last meeting. So we'll defer on that.
Okay.
Thanks.
So that brings us to questions and comments regarding tonight's agenda only. So if anybody wants to raise their hand, this is the opportunity for you to speak on anything or read letters you've written. And there'll be an opportunity, as always, to speak at the end about anything.
All right, we got one hand raised, Christine Buff.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I have a quick question, and it's probably Ricardo that could answer it. I'm just curious, how how do you determine your quarantining in the secondary campus? I'm just curious, I know it's different because the kids are moving and it's going from class to class. So how are you making the determination once someone reports that they're positive? How does that get determined? How are you guys doing it?
Yes, hi, Christine. What we're doing is we're looking at literally seating charts, and as Dr. Massaro mentioned at the beginning, I do sometimes have to go around with a tape measure to make a determination as to whether or not other children or other adults were seated next to that individual that's the positive case within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes of time. So those are the two criteria that we look at as a team to make a determination if someone was a close contact to anyone at the secondary complex.
Okay, so basically the most of the kids or the classes at this point have like assigned seatings.
Correct.
And how are we handling like the sanitizing of the desks and the partitions and things like that? I mean, how is that? I'm just curious how that's going. I know that this is a whole new thing for our district. So how is, not the sanitizing of the desks, but with the partitions and stuff, like how are you guys managing that? Maybe, I don't know who can answer that.
So, well, it's all part of our reopening plan, actually. We have a lot of help from our teachers on that, but our custodial staff is, out and about all the time. If you're in the halls, you see them constantly out there. All the frequently touched surfaces are cleaned between classes and things like that. And so it's a total team effort from everybody contributing to the cleaning and sanitization within the school.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Bill?
Nobody yet. No other hands.
Okay, so then we'll move on with the agenda, and as always, there'll be the opportunity at the end to ask any questions or any comments. So the Board of Education is asked to accept the minutes of the following meeting as prepared by the district clerk. Minutes of the meeting of the Board of Education on March 17th, 2021, Exhibit 1, motion.
Motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Yes.
Yes, motion carries unanimously.
So the next two items, George, we could probably table together.
Okay. So recommended action, like upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Ed tables the budget adoption and the property tax report card until April 20th meeting, 2021. Did I do that right, Carrie? Motion.
Motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Yes.
Yes, motion
Yes.
carries unanimously. Yeah, we have a bit to think about, right? So, I think that's you now, Janine.
Me. Consent agenda vote. Be it resolved, a motion to approve the consent agenda asterisk agenda items or consent agenda items. Consent agenda items are approved by a single vote unless they're removed from being a consent item prior to vote.
Motion,
Motion.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Holy guacamole.
So there's a whole bunch in there. I think I'd like to touch, and I almost want to pull these out individually, but the motions have been made. First and foremost, I'd like to speak to some people who've made significant contributions in our school district. First, Jim Abraham, who's a member of our math department at the high school, and has been for many, many years. I went back into his file today. And looked back all the way into the 90s when he was first hired as a permanent substitute, and then moved forward and went through the ranks. And when you talk about somebody that has been teaching for quite some time, Jim has been described as nothing less than one of the most committed teachers. He's a kind of first in, last out kind of guy, even to today, where he shows up early in the morning and is one of the last to leave. and has always been described for his dedication to students and a passion for math that's unparalleled. Developing tremendous connections and always contributing in other ways like yearbook, and obviously, working for, sports, keeping time at sports games and things like that. I think one of the most significant things is that, in speaking with Janine, he actually had what she described as the patience of a saint to teach her how to run the clock for a football game. So anybody that can deal with that certainly can be canonized immediately. Sorry, Janine. but truly, no, Jim has had a very distinguished career at Santa Moriches. And as I joke about that, but it truly is, his heart that matters and what he's done for kids all along the way. And in speaking in particular with Jeremy and Marissa today, they had just these wonderful things to say about him. So congratulations to Jim Abraham on his retirement.
Well said, Dr. Masaryk. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
That's a long and distinguished career.
Absolutely. One of our other retirees is Donna Bennett. And Donna is a LOTE teacher. Donna is in our middle school. And Donna is truly, again, one of those people that just gives everything, heart and soul, into her work, and is really noted for making very strong connections to kids, and in particular, kids who really need somebody to be looking out for them. And so, she is somebody who just has that unique ability to really connect to kids and truly cares about them inside of school and outside of school. She hasn't been here as long. She has, doesn't have that many years here, but she has a lot of years in education. And we were fortunate to get somebody who came back to education after raising her family and came with that true sense of empathy and heart that a mom can bring to teaching that really made a difference for a lot of kids. And I think she has some big shoes to fill for next year. So congratulations, Donna Bennett.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple other things in there, and I'd like to publicly thank, in particular, before I speak about Marissa a little bit, who we've heard from a few times tonight, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about Jeremy Thode. Jeremy is a class act. Jeremy, when we asked somebody to step up as principal, as an interim principal, he raised his hand. He said, pandemic, no pandemic, whatever. We know what he did last spring for all of the kids in that graduating class, and what he's done to be really the heart and soul and the voice behind that hashtag CM Positivity movement we've got going. Jeremy never shied away from a challenge. And when we were in the weeds, he would sit there at our administrative council meetings, and his famous words were, "Piece of cake." He really just, jokingly would always put a smile on your face and say, all right, whatever we put out there, he'd say, all right, we'll do it. And never blinked, never shied away from the challenge, and really was an outstanding interim principal for us. I want to reassure everybody that's out there that might be saying, well, Jeremy has been the principal and he's been the principal all year. I spoke with Marissa, I spoke with Jeremy, and Jeremy will continue to be sort of master of ceremonies throughout the remainder of this year, despite changing roles and making way for Marissa to move in on May 1st as principal. So I think that will be a nice transition. The two of them work so beautifully together. So to kind of transition from thanking Jeremy up and down for all he has done for us, I also want to welcome Marissa for May 1st to be, the newest member of our, permanent member of our administrative team. Marissa is just such an outstanding, everybody knows her as an outstanding teacher, an outstanding team player. Everyone from her colleagues, her teachers support her, the parents support her, the administrative team supports her, but most important, I think the kids support her. I've had an opportunity a few times to be over in the high school and see her interactions with kids that are just, really just top notch, the way she treats them with dignity and respect and treats all kids the same and encourages them to be at their best. Clearly somebody who I've had the opportunity to watch her in this role. And it's been interesting because the unique nature of the year allowed her to take on many of the principal responsibilities alongside of Jeremy and work off each other's strengths. And her tremendous level of organization, her tremendous level of just natural leadership ability has really made it, one of those things where, we went out and we looked for a principal earlier. And, we kind of saw what was out there in the world. And we kind of looked internally, said, Jeremy, you can do this for now. And Marissa stepped up as an assistant principal, but took on so much more of a role, continuing to teach classes, continuing to serve as an IB coordinator, continuing to serve as a class advisor, really juggling a lot of hats and doing it with such grace and such just finesse and ability to manage all of these things. I am so excited to welcome Marissa as a part of our team. So I thank the board for your support in this recommendation. And I think we have a real winner there in Marissa Mangonia as the next principal of Center Moriches High School.
So I'll start with Marissa and congratulate her as well. And we do, as a board, fully support her being appointed as the permanent principal of the high school and such wonderful things. And we expect great things out of her in the future. And I know that she'll meet those expectations. And my guess is more than likely surpass them as well. So we're really excited about that and moving forward. And I do also want to, on behalf of the Board of Ed, publicly thank Jeremy for everything that he's done for our community and our children this year and stepping up. I keep trying to catch him at one of the games so I can thank him in person, but he's always moving when he's there, so it's kind of difficult.
Yes.
So, one of these days, I'll get to shake
Yeah.
his hand and thank him for everything he's done this year for us, stepping up and the wonderful job he's done, and we know he'll continue to do. So thank you very much to Jeremy and congratulations to Marissa. And we're looking
Yes.
forward to it.
Thank you.
And I think that's it, right? The agenda? Yeah? Ron, are you good?
I didn't.
I actually was waiting for a minute there for
I'm
somebody
sorry,
else.
I'm out of words.
I don't know what I was thinking. That's my job. I thought somebody else was going to do it. All right. That brings us to
Do we want to acknowledge the donation?
Go ahead, Marcus.
I actually was hoping that Ron would give us some details on it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's the 500, it's the
That's right.
500 from the Suffolk suits.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, all right. We have, as part of Suffolk County School Superintendents, part of the, we are a member of the Brookhaven Cluster, and through the pandemic, we've had some savings. So the Brookhaven Cluster has awarded $500 scholarships or given money back to districts that just in surplus funds, and we basically are being able to give that, and we've decided to give that as a scholarship to a high school senior. So
Okay.
that's what that is. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. Thank you. This brings us to the part of the agenda where you can ask questions about anything. If you have a letter you want to read, groups are asked to have one speaker. So, the hand raise. Bill?
Nobody hand raised yet.
Okay.
Now looks clear.
All right. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. There will be a special board meeting Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 at 6:30 via Zoom for purpose of voting by resolution for Eastern Suffolk BOCES budget and board members. The next regular Board of Education meeting and budget hearing is May 5th, 2021. Executive session at 6, action meeting approximately 7 o'clock. Location to be determined. Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good
Good night.
night.
Good night, everyone.